Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are at the start of 2026, about halfway through the 2025 to 26 season. You can see the Blackhawks rank 7th in the Western Conference. We are actually 3rd in our division. We've got a 5 point gap on the teams chasing us for some of those final playoff spots. So we're in decent position as the calendar flips over to 2026. Obviously, still have almost exactly half the season left with 40 games to go. So whether or not we end up returning to the playoffs for a third straight season will be dependent on our performance over the next 3.5, 4 months. We have made 3 offers to some of our own players who are potential free agents. Paul Cotter, pretty versatile winger who's got 22 points this year in 32 games, has been a pretty productive player for us. Adam Wilsby, defenseman who we picked up last year off of waivers, has split this year between the AHL and Chicago due to a lot of injuries that we've had. But thinking about potentially bringing him back. And then Alec Regula, another defenseman in his mid-20s who's been up with us the last few years. I would hope in a perfect world that these 2 guys are our 7th defenseman next year and somebody that we try to stash in the AHL if he can make it through waivers. But making the offers to both of them because it's going to be pretty hard for us to keep Caleb Jones. He's not much better than those 2 guys, although I think he is a little bit better than them. But he's also at this point looking for over $4 million a year. So I think given the fact that we're going to be definitely moving on from Caleb Jones this offseason, and some of the young defensemen that we have probably aren't going to be quite ready for next season, even though we would hope to have them for the 27-28 season. So especially given that the numbers that we've offered to Wilsby and Regula are not off the charts, pretty confident that if we decided we wanted to move on from those guys at $950,000 for Wilsby, $1.35 million a year for Regula, we'd be able to get a player or a draft pick back in return and not really making a long-term commitment to either of them. So with those 3 offers out there and the fact that we have already re-signed Rasmus Anderson, the really big decisions that we're going to have to make are our starting goalie, Mackenzie Blackwood, who's looking for about $7 million a year, and then left winger Ross Colton, who I believe is looking for around 5.5. Yeah, almost $5.5 million. Colton, I don't think there's any chance we bring him back. I don't think Mackenzie Blackwood is a $7 million a year goalie, but unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's going to be a ton of big-time goalies on the free agent market next year. So we're going to continue to monitor the situation there. Could obviously go older with Hellebusick or Markstrom, but if we want someone who's in their 20s, Blackwood is about as good as anybody out there. I guess we could go for Gustafsson or Luukkonen. So there will be some goalies on the market, which means I tend to think we won't make a $7 million-ish a year offer to Blackwood before the end of this season, but no guarantees. But feel that we'll be in decent shape if we can get the 3 guys that we've made the offers to signed at this point, and hopefully just move on and get the season going in the brand new year here. As I said, the goal of this team is to absolutely make the playoffs, job security with better performance over the last month and a half, moving in a decent direction. As far as fan happiness, job security itself is pretty strong, and team harmony is pretty much as good as it's ever been. Our cliques have been dissolved. We've traded away the controversial Patrick Kane after he did something very naughty last offseason, and at this point it's just a matter of kind of waiting out the last key injury which has impacted us most of the year Philip Hronik should be back any day. Dylan Larkin, who only played in 5 games for us before a torn rotator cuff, should be back around the All-Star break, and hopefully that will be a big boost for our offense when Larkin does get back, because he has scored 45 and 53 goals in his first 2 seasons with the Blackhawks. So certainly losing our top scorer by far has left a big hole in our lineup. And we've got good news. Cotter, Wilsby, and Regula all signed the contracts that we offered to them. And Philip Hronik is going to be back, so that gives us a little optionality in the defensive situation, which is good because Caleb Jones got banged up in our last performance. That loss to Carolina to start off the new year. So only a hand contusion, probably not going to be gone that long, but we'll put him right on the injured list just to avoid having to send somebody through waivers for a little bit longer. Most importantly, get Hronik back onto the active roster. And some good news here in early to mid-January. Dylan Larkin ready to resume skating, so might have him back as anticipated right around the All-Star break. And it's really going to be important to have him back because the month of January has been going pretty poorly for the Blackhawks. You can see we've lost 5 out of 6 games to start off the new year, and we are very tenuously holding on to the 3rd place in the Central Division. But you can see we're only 2 points ahead of the Stars, and they've got 3 games in hand against us. And there are now 6 teams out in the Pacific with 50 or more points. So we'd be in the playoffs still if the season ended today, but the margin of error has gotten a lot smaller with the poor performance we've had so far in early 2026. And as we get ready for the All-Star break, Victor Arvidsson going to be out for close to 2 weeks, 30-stitch facial cut. So that's not great for Mr. Arvidsson. The good news for the Blackhawks, though, is that did start playing a little better lately, although we did lose the first game this week at home against Montreal. We have now won 2 in a row against the Rangers and the Flyers to head into the All-Star break feeling a bit better about things than we were. You can see we got 55 points, so we would be in the playoffs if season were to end today. Looking at the Western Conference, we're up 3 on the likes of Vancouver and 4 on the likes of Nashville. But honestly, the Nashville is more important because if we stay in the top 3 in the Western Conference, then we're not going to get into a battle with points with some of those bigger teams out in the Pacific Division. So main goal is really to stay well into the playoffs, stay in the top 3 in the Western Conference, and clearly there's an opportunity for us to even get past Winnipeg into the 2-hole in the conference, in the division. The Avalanche have definitely separated themselves from the rest of the division at this point. You can see we're only +2 goal differential over the course of the season, although we are going to be missing Arvidsson for a while now. The hope is that Larkin will be back in the not-so-distant future, and honestly, it looks like Larkin and Arvidsson may be fully healthy about the same time, but Arvidsson can still play if we need him to, which is positive, but also not the worst thing in the world that we've got about a week and a half off now till our next game at home against Vancouver. And I have been misspeaking on one thing, even though we did just have this very strange break in the season, 51 games into the season. That wasn't actually the All-Star break. It was just a week and a half where the Blackhawks were not playing any games. Looks like, I'm guessing, this gap, maybe the All-Star game and the Olympics, or maybe the Olympics replaces the All-Star game this year. I'm honestly not completely sure how it works, but Have been no All-Stars announced yet. Taking a look at the standings, though, as we get ready to play again. Can see we are tied for that third spot in the Central Division with the Predators now. But fortunately, we do have a game in hand against them. But we're really not that far from being out of the playoffs. We're really a point or two from being out of the playoffs. If Anaheim or Vancouver wins their next game, Nashville wins and we lose, we're kind of out. So we've got an opportunity against one of those teams that if we fall out of the top three, we're going to be fighting with for a wild card with a home game against Vancouver today. So hopefully we'll get the job done. Our players should certainly be very well rested, although unfortunately Larkin is not quite back, still day-to-day at this point. And fortunately, we did come out of that little hiatus with a really big game, 7-3 win at home against Vancouver. You can see Cotter with a goal and 2 assists, Gavin Hayes with a goal and an assist, and Mitch Marner with a goal and 2 assists. So a pretty dominant offensive performance by the Blackhawks in that one. And good news as we get ready for a game against our rivals, the Blues. Arvidsson almost 100%, Dylan Larkin ready. So in terms of winning this actual game, probably not optimal because we're going to have to send Colton Dock down to the AHL to make room on the roster for the now healthy Mr. Larkin. But nobody on the injured list right now for the Blackhawks as we approach the end of January. So given that we are now completely healthy and we would still be in the playoffs in the 3-hole in the Central Division if the season were to end right now, feel that we're as well positioned as we can possibly be for the final 30 games of the season. Well, the good news is that we won Dylan Larkin's first game back. He didn't score any points for us. Bad news is that he's once again day-to-day with an injury, so should only be out for a little over a week, it looks like, but certainly not the result that we were hoping for after waiting the better part of the season to get him back. But hopefully this will prove to be just a minor speed bump for him. I guess the good news with this 8 games that he's going to be out. Actually, it's not great news because he's going to end up missing 3 games before we go on another long break. So his second game back probably not going to be until February 25th, unfortunately, on the road against Dallas. Or sorry, at home against Dallas. And thinking about next year, there was potential that Jack Eichel would have been a free agent, but he is signed to remain the next 4 seasons in Vegas. So we're probably not going to have enough money to go after a potentially transformational player like Eichel, but still a bummer that it won't at least be on the market for us to dream about. And definitely mixed results in this first week in February for the Blackhawks. You can see we won a nice game against St. Louis on the road, but then lost a pair of games at home, 3-2. And we've got 2.5 weeks to think about that now with the break for the Winter Olympics. So with the way the standings look right now, we are second in the Central Division, which is good. But we're only 3 points away from being out of the playoffs. So it's going to be quite a battle here over the last 25 games of the season. Good news is that by the time we are back, everyone should be healthy, with Larkin day-to-day now with a bruised neck, and Horvat also day-to-day with a mild abdominal strain. Just have to hope that any of our players who are headed off to international duty won't suffer any significant injuries doing that. And the Winter Olympics do get underway today. You can see we've got Quinn Hughes on international duty for the U.S., where he's going to be joined by Dylan Larkin, fresh off the injury list. For Czech Republic, we've got Filip Hronek. And then we also have from Canada, Mitch Marner, and then from Sweden, Victor Arvidsson. So 5 different players representing 4 different countries in the Winter Olympics for the Chicago Blackhawks in 2026. Let's see if one of them or 2 of them, potentially if the U.S. wins, can take home the gold medal. And although we had a lot of players going in the Winter Olympics, did not end up with any gold medalists, as Finland topped Canada 3-2 to take the gold medal in the 2026 Winter Olympics. So we are going to be headed back now to the final third of the season. We've got about 10 days until the trade deadline, so that will give us an opportunity to potentially figure out if we want to bring somebody on board who can help get this team across the finish line and drag us into the playoffs, hopefully. And I don't think there's any way we'll possibly be able to pull off this deal, but Edmonton is apparently listening to offers on Connor McDavid. He's in the final year of his contract, and it doesn't seem like they've been able to reach an agreement with him. Can't imagine that we're going to be able to get him on board or fit him in. I've also just noticed all of a sudden that we're somehow over the salary cap. And I don't get exactly what happened to put us there, but that may force us to trade away somebody. Obviously, we haven't made any acquisitions. Nothing should have changed. We do have Larkin back on now, but he was on at the beginning of the year, and we haven't made any substantive moves. I did at one point on the action menu click auto setup organization while I was playing, and sometimes that leads to some weird things happening, but it doesn't look like any of our big players were extended or given more money or anything, so I can't figure out exactly what's going on, but that may be something that I need to figure out and could result in us having to dump a player just when we're finally back and healthy and trying to make a run at things here. Yeah, and it just looked like for some reason, I guess I should have stayed on that thing to show you that although the salary definitely looks like it's over the cap at this point, the money that puts us over the cap is really driven by players who are in the minors right now. But normally their contracts I don't think show up here, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but it's not making us trade away players or fix things before we can play, so I think we're okay. Looking at the trading block, a few interesting players out there, especially now with Connor McDavid on the block. Have to take a look. No possible way that we could fit him in, but clearly if there's an opportunity to bring on a player like that, you do what you got to do. I would trade away our captain, Mitch Marner, for him, but he doesn't want to go. Larkin won't go to Edmonton either. Yeah, Konechny obviously straight up wouldn't work. I know we're not going to make a trade here. I just want to see what the price really is. If we added in our first this coming year, our first the year after, and our first the year after that, along with Konechny, it still doesn't get it done. So as much as I'd love to have him, hopefully someone else will pay a high price for McDavid, and hopefully he'll be a free agent next year. I think it'll be difficult, or later this year, quite honestly. I think it would be extremely difficult for us to bring him on board, and I'm sure that anyone who's going to give up a ton for him is going to try to get him locked up before he hits free agency. But clearly, if Connor McDavid was on the open market this coming summer, bringing him on board would certainly be something for us to think about. And given that we are right up against it with the cap, I don't really see anything logical for us to do. As we've talked about a lot in this episode and certainly the previous episode, had a lot of injuries this year. Right now, the team is as healthy as it's ever been, and we still are in a playoff position if the season were over. So kind of feel that for the final 24 games of the season, unless somebody makes us an offer we can't refuse, we're probably going to run these last couple months of the season with the guys that we've intended to have on our team the whole year. It's also a situation where, although I think we should end up in the playoff team, you look at the top teams in hockey with 77, 75, 76, 74 points. There's not a dominant team this year, although certainly the Kings and the Kraken and the Flames, also out in the West with us, are pretty good teams. But I don't know that we're just one or two players away from being a Stanley Cup favorite. Unless that one or two players was a Connor McDavid type player, then. But we just can't fit him under the cap. I mean, he's still making $10+ million this year. So ownership just wants us to finish in the top half of the league this season, which we are well positioned to at this point. I don't think there's any real point in stripping our farm system or tweaking things on the margins. I think we're going to, as I've talked about, run with who brung us this far for the rest of the way. And we had a crazy game yesterday against the Flames. Lost 8-7 against that very powerful Western Conference rival. We did. It was an overtime loss, so we did at least get a point out of it. But you can see, obviously, tons of offense. They scored 5 goals on us in the second period. We came back with outscoring them 3-2 in the third to get it into OT, but they got the winner. Marner with the biggest game for us with 2 goals and an assist. But we got a point out of it, but obviously would have hoped for more than that. Taking a look at the standings as we begin the month of March, kind of tied for second in the Central Division with the Wild right now. Actually, we're in a 3-way tie, if I look closely, with the Wild, the Predators, and ourselves at 65 points. And unfortunately, there's 5 teams over in the Pacific Division that have more than 65 points. So one of these 3 teams would be the odd team out. Positive thing for us is that we've got to win more than the Predators right now. We're tied with the Wild, have the exact same record as them right now. So it's going to be a battle to get into the playoffs. Still have a couple of days before the trade deadline if we decide to modify our strategy on that front, but I don't think that we will. And obviously things can change, but as we approach the end of the season, Rocky Wirt's still satisfied with our performance, fans still satisfied. Supposedly replacing us is out of the question, so those things are positive. Looking at the job security, fan happiness could definitely be better. Would like to hopefully win some games this last quarter of the season and make some strides there, and then hopefully do even better in the playoffs. But ownership, most importantly, is still pretty pleased with what we're doing, and the team locker room is in good shape here as we get closer to the end of the season. And the Blackhawks got an important 3-2 win against the Dallas yesterday. But unfortunately, Bo Horvat is going to be out for about a month with a bruised kidney. So getting a little more banged up now because we also did just put Hayes on to the injured list with that bruised collarbone. So may regret not doing more at the trade deadline, but I just didn't see a guy out there who was going to fit in well with our cap situation and also be someone who we could get for a reasonable price. Obviously, if we had known that Horvat was going to be gone for 1 to 2 months, that would have cleared a lot of money off of our books for the near term, and we could have potentially brought somebody on. But unfortunately, we're 3 days past the trade deadline when we're finding out about his injury. And the month of March has not been kind to the Blackhawks so far. Won just 1 out of our first 5 games. And unfortunately, that means that right now, if the season were to end today, we'd be on the outside of the playoffs looking in. We're fourth in the Central Division, but there are three teams over in the Pacific Division that have more points than us at this point. Wild now have two more wins than us. We're tied with the Predators in wins. So going to have to play better over this last month or so of the season to be able to sneak into the playoffs this year. Hopefully it can start today with a game on the road against the Canadiens, who are in a flat-footed tie with us for points on the year. Hopefully we can get a W against them on the road. And the Blackhawks are rapidly falling out of the playoff race. You can see we're now fifth in the Central. We lost that game at Montreal, and then we lost a game at Edmonton a couple days ago. We've now got a second game at Edmonton, followed by a game against Anaheim. Edmonton in particular seems like a game that we need to be able to win if we're going to get back into the playoff hunt with 16 games to go. Good news is the Blackhawks playing a little bit better over the past week. You can see we got 3 straight wins on the road against Anaheim, Seattle, and Vegas, but then lost at home to Edmonton. Finish off with home games against the Islanders and Anaheim, and then a road game at Dallas to finish off the month of March. So even though we've been playing a little better, we're still on the outside looking in as far as the playoffs. It's a crazy battle here in the Central Division with 4 teams likely competing for 2 playoff spots separated by just 2 points. Unfortunately for us, we're tied with the Predators for the fewest wins among those teams. Got 11 games left, so our destiny is still absolutely in our own control. But it's going to be a battle to get into the playoffs, which we were trying to avoid this year. You may remember from last season, we got in by virtue of a win on the final day of the season against the Sharks, who were the worst team in hockey last year. They're still tied for being the worst team in hockey this year with the Oilers at this point, and don't know what our schedule looks like, but hopefully it won't come back down to winning an 82nd game against the Sharks. No, it won't. We're going to finish with a home and home against Minnesota, so that could be an incredibly important 2 games to end the season. You would have to think if either of the teams can win both of those games, they're probably in good shape for the playoffs. But there's still a lot of hockey to be played until we get to those final couple games of the season. And won our games at home against the Islanders and Anaheim before losing a tough 1-0 game against Dallas to finish off the month of March. So now we are in the home stretch of this season, have just 8 games to go. And if the season was to end today, we're once again on the outside of the playoffs looking in. The Jets have kind of separated themselves from the pack. So quite honestly, it could be 3 teams between the Predators, the Wild, and the Blackhawks fighting for 1 playoff spot right now. It's conceivable that one of those 3 teams also ends up as a wild card, and it's not impossible that we end up with 2 wild cards in the Central Division. There's a lot of teams clustered in the low 80s in terms of points at this point in the season. Unfortunately, with only 80, we are the lowest of those kind of 11 teams that are competing for 8 playoff spots in the Western Conference. And we did suffer a real bad injury in that last game. Mitch Marner out with dizziness and nausea for 1 to 2 weeks, going to be game unavailable. So we're going to put him onto the IL. Hopefully he won't be gone too long. And the hope is that by the time we get to our next game, Bo Horvat will be ready to play for him. But it's been an ugly season for the Blackhawks in terms of the injuries. Not that that's an excuse, but certainly losing Dylan Larkin for much of the year hurt us. You can see he's got 21 points in his 23 games this year, which is a bit less productive than he's been in his first 2 years with the Blackhawks when he's averaged over a point a game. But certainly if we had him in the lineup for the 45 or so, 50 games that he missed, could be in a somewhat better spot in the playoff race. And with the Blackhawks on the outside of the playoff race looking in at this point, the fans are not thrilled. Opinion on us is definitely split at this point, although Rocky Wirth said he's still satisfied and replacing us is out of the question. But clearly, if we are able to get into the playoffs, we'll feel much better about our job security. And we're going to start off the month of April with back-to-back games at Colorado and at Arizona. Avalanche, the best team in the Central Division. Theoretically, Arizona should be a somewhat easier game on the road, but we're getting close to the point of the season where every game is going to become a must-win for us. Horvat back, but only at 80%, so we're going to let him rest for another day, and we'll play him tomorrow against Arizona when presumably some of our players will be a little worn out after the back-to-backs. We're going to start Blackwood today. Hope that we can steal a win against the better Avalanche team, and then we'll put Skarek in goal tomorrow against Arizona and hope that we can beat the weaker team with our backup. So we'll find out what happens as we sim through these final weeks of the season. A good 3-1 win for the Blackhawks, so that's very positive. If we can win a second game in a row on the road, that would be good. Dylan Holloway out with nausea, day-to-day injury, but certainly we'll take him out, put Horvat in. I guess the question is whether we want to play Gavin Hayes. He's had that facial cut and he's been available, but we haven't been playing him. But honestly, Dickinson is only 75% instead of in terms of his fitness, so we'll get Hayes back into the lineup. Dickinson, who's a little winded, and Holloway, who's not available, are going to be forwards that we don't play today. Pretty much everyone's pretty fit among our defensemen. We're certainly not going to take Anderson out of the lineup here in these final days unless he was really winded, so no change to the defensemen. Move Skarek up to be our starting goalie for this critical game in the desert. Let's see what happens. Another victory, 2 straight 3-1 victories for the Blackhawks. So that was a pretty good result for us, quite honestly, for 2 straight games on the road. And now got no rest for the weary. You know, we are headed back home, which is good. And we've got 3 games at home against Winnipeg, the Devils, and Calgary before going on the road at Toronto, and then finishing up with that home and home against Minnesota in what could be a critical game for our playoffs. Although Minnesota has fallen back a little bit for the time being, they're still right in the mix with us. If the season were over right now, we'd be in. So it's just a matter of hopefully winning at least 4 of these last 6 games, and I feel pretty good about the fact that we'll be able to sneak into the playoffs. Home against Winnipeg is a big one. You know, it's not inconceivable that we could pass the Jets. They've got a lot more wins than us, but if we're going to have any hope of passing them and getting into the 2 spot in the Central, going to need to win that game at home tomorrow. But what a difference a day makes. All we did was sit and watch for a day, and now we're on the outside of the playoffs looking in with only 84 points if the season were to end today after Nashville got past us. So in Vegas, with 85 points, is a point better than us for the final wild card spot, although we've got a game in hand against them. But this game against Winnipeg is going to be critical for us. Unfortunately, star defenseman Quinn Hughes out with a bruised jaw day to day, so that'll get Caleb Jones back into the lineup. Still going to sit Holloway, and given that he's a little spent, we're going to put Mackenzie Entwistle onto the bench and get Dickinson back into the lineup. So a couple little shifts to who's playing. Get Blackwood back in goal for us. He's very hot right now. Hopefully he can help carry us through these final week and a half of the season. Huge game against Winnipeg for us today, but they're all big at this point, and a 4-2 loss. So that's certainly not helpful. When it seemed a lot more manageable when I said we needed to win 4 out of 6, then now 4 out of 5 I think guarantees us the playoffs. But that's a much bigger challenge for us. Winning 80% of our games sounds a lot more difficult than winning 67% of our games. Got New Jersey coming up. Not even sure where they are in the Eastern Conference standings. They're in a battle for a playoff position also. 84 points, exactly the same as us. So we've got the home ice advantage. Hopefully that'll work in our favor. But schedule's not getting any easier, that's for sure. Quinn Hughes is available, but he's at 80%. Holloway is also available, but at 80%. Entwistle's back healthy, so we'll take Colton Dock out of the lineup, let Entwistle back full fitness, I guess. It had nothing to do with health. See if we can steal this game here with a couple important players on the bench. And then hopefully they'll be fully healthy for the final 4 games of the season. But might not matter if we don't start winning. Did get a 4-3 win over the Devils, so a big win there. Quinn Hughes and Holloway both getting close. We got a game against Calgary tomorrow, so no guarantees that they're going to be healthy for that. And Calgary is the top team in hockey. And they're still in a huge battle for the top record in not just hockey, but the Western Conference and honestly the Pacific Division with the Kings. So the Flames definitely have a lot to play for here today against us. So do we. Right now we are a point behind Vegas for the final wild card spot in the Western Conference. We do have this game in hand against them, so very big opportunity for us here against the Flames today. And even though Hughes is only at 80% fitness, we're going to put him back in the lineup rather than Jones. We're pretty close to must-win mode at this point. It seems like every season comes down to this with these Blackhawks. So either the schedule makers have figured things out perfectly, the Blackhawks weren't as good as we had hoped, or I'm not as good as this game as I think I am. But it's definitely been a battle this year. That 3-1 loss against Calgary is going to really hurt. We may have to win these last 3 to get into the playoffs, but certainly losing 2 out of 3 at home, including both of the games to Western Conference opponents, was bitterly disappointing. Headed on the road at Toronto, and then the home and home against the Wild. Toronto looks to be pretty secure in their playoff spot at this point. I guess mathematically they're not in yet, but they're certainly in a better position than we are right now. Those 2 games against the Wild that I mentioned are going to be critical, but it's not inconceivable that both the Blackhawks and the Wild end up missing the playoffs, particularly if we split those games, given that Vegas has more points than either of our teams right now. And as we get into these final games, these final days and these final games of the season, certainly would be a huge boost if we could get Mitch Marner back. Unlikely tomorrow, but if we could have him for those final 2 games of the year, that would be a nice boost for our lineup against the Wild. Now, it's conceivable that those games may not even mean anything if we can't beat Toronto. I think we probably still will be mathematically in it before at least for the first game against the Wild. But we are getting to a point where if it's not must win, it's about as close and painful, as painfully close to must win as we can be without being in a must win situation. Going up against a big team that's got a lot that they're playing for. Let's see what we can do on the road in Canada. 8-4 loss. So that definitely hurt. Take a look at the standings. Just hope that Vegas is Vegas with 89 points. They've only got one game left. But if Vegas wins that game, we can't get by them in points. All they really need is a tie because we can't get by them in wins. So we don't control our own destiny anymore. We've got to win both games against the Wild, and then we still can't catch the Predators. So there's no chance that we're going to be one of the top 3 teams in the Central at this point. And we can't catch the Ducks either. So we're going to be scoreboard watching against Vegas, but we are in a must-win situation at this point. We've got to win both of the games against the Wild and then hope that the Golden Knights lose. We'll take a look at the schedule and see when their final game of the season is and who it is against. They are against the Kings, so they are home, which helps them. But the Kings are a pretty good team, so the schedule at least gives us hope. First and foremost, though, we've got to win both of our games, or it's going to be a bitterly disappointing season and a missed opportunity to get into the playoffs for these Blackhawks. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Marner's going to be back yet. He is game available now, so I think I will put him onto the roster so we can potentially play him tomorrow when he'll be hopefully a little better than 80%. So I think Colton Dock is going to go down to Rockford. We will move Mr. Marner back onto the active roster. 80%, there's certainly an argument to even play him today. But we got to win both games. And he'll be more fit tomorrow, and we'll have other players who may be less fit tomorrow. So I think it makes sense to not play Marner today and save him for the home game. So we'll keep Entwistle, Marner, and Caleb Jones on the bench. And we are in a must-win situation at this point. Even a tie is not going to be, or we wouldn't have a tie, but even a point from an overtime loss is not going to be good enough for us. Got to win this one on the road in the Twin Cities to have any chance for that last game to matter. And we did get the W, and it does look like Vegas lost their final game. So you're saying we've got a chance. Just like last year, with one game to go, the Blackhawks control their own destiny. We win in game 82, and we are once again the 8th seed in the Western Conference playoffs after facing a must-win game 82 for a second straight year. We lose, and the final spot's going to go to Vegas. So a lot of pressure on the Blackhawks tonight. Going to have Skarek in goal with his full fitness. Keep the defensemen the same. Marner still only at 80%, but I think we want him going today. The question is who we're going to take out of the lineup for him. Not Larkin. Colton or Cotter, perhaps. Colton in his final run with us has been solid this year, but Cotter's been better. Going to take Colton out of the lineup for Marner. keep Entwistle out. We'll see what happens. Hopefully Marner, even if he's not 100% fit, can contribute offensively. Hopefully we get a good performance from Mr. Skarek in goal, and hopefully we can sneak back into the playoffs. And it was not to be. We got the 1 point in the overtime loss, it looks like, so that's just brutal. Victor Arvidsson, bone edema in his wrist, but looking at the standings, I think it's done, because there's 42 wins for Vegas with 89 points. We've got 40 wins and 89 points, so just brutal to lose in overtime to a team that really had nothing that they were playing for. Jumped out to a 2-0 lead with goals from Hayes and Sillinger. They bounced back in the second with a couple of goals. The third, we took the lead early with Holloway. First off, came back, and then we went to a shootout. Ugh. Wow. Brutal. Went to a shootout, and Joel Eriksson Ek does the job for Minnesota. So brutal way to miss out on the playoffs. Skarek with 53 saves. So he kind of did his job, even though he'll be saddled with the overtime loss in the final game of the season. But the Blackhawks season appears to be over. And of course, by virtue of their extra 2 wins, Vegas in the playoffs, the Blackhawks are not a great season for us. Only a +4 goal differential on the year, so we weren't that great at home. We were decent on the road. Brutal that it comes down to a shootout to decide whether or not we were in the playoffs. And Blackhawks lost that shootout, so the season is over. We will follow all of the action in the playoffs in our next episode, review our top performers, our bottom performers. Job security still seems solid, although we did just miss out on being in the top half of the league. Fans not really pleased right now. Maybe we'll be able to do something in the off season to get them feeling better about the team. Harmony is good. The players are generally happy. But the players in the team, not that successful when all is said and done. 4th season for us now as the general manager of the Blackhawks, and got 2 playoff appearances, 2023 to 2024, 2024 to 2025. Did get that championship our 2nd season, so we're still hanging on to the platitudes we got for winning that, but you can see the 40, 33, and 9 record we had this year. Fewest wins that we've had, although it was 2 more points than we put up in our first season the other time that we missed the playoffs. You know, both times we missed the playoffs, we have been right on the borderline of doing it, but quite honestly, both times we've made the playoffs, it's been a nail biter until the final weeks or the final day of the season. So I don't know what to think about the playthrough so far. I guess with a championship in 4 seasons, it's been successful. 2 playoff appearances in 4 seasons, and that 4th season being one of the seasons that we didn't make the playoffs, though, makes it feel a little bit less satisfying. But we'll review where we think we stand, what our plans are with the team, who are our top and bottom performers for this season in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.